My husband and I were at Walmart the other day. We just got through shopping, put our stuff in the truck, and I was walking around and I hear this lady behind me saying, "Excuse me, ma'am." I turn around and there's this lady there. You could just see the defeat on her. She said, "I was wondering if you could help me out." She said, "I'm temporarily living out of my car and I just need $18 to go to the truck stop and have a shower." I said, "I just don't really carry cash on me. I'm sorry." I climbed in the truck and I pulled out my wallet to see if I had anything on me. I wasn't going to pull it out in front of her just because I don't want to put myself in that kind of situation. I looked and I had $1 and I had 20. And my husband's like, "What was all that about?" I said, "She is living temporarily out of her car and is just looking for enough to get a shower at the truck stop." And he's like, "Oh." He said, "Well, let me look and see if I got anything." And I said, "Well, I've got $1." He goes, "Oh, give it to her." I said, "Well, I also got 20. We kind of talked about it for a second. And I said, I just am going to give her this 20 because there's nothing better than feeling clean." He pulls over by her and he says, "Hey, ma'am." She turns around and he goes, "Here, this is for you." And she grabs his hand and she holds on to it. "Are you sure?" He goes, "Absolutely." And she took the 20. I said, "I wish I would have had a little more so that she could have got food too." And there was going to be an extra couple dollars. And we were talking about it on the way home. It really doesn't matter if that's really what she needed the money for, or if she was just, that's how she earns her money, right? What mattered was we did our part. What she does with it is on her. But we had to do our part because at the end of the day, you got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing, no matter what their intentions were, no matter what they were going to do with it. That's not my concern. My concern is I did the right thing. Now, do I honestly believe she was living out of her car and needed it for a shower? I do. I actually looked up to see how much a shower would cost at the closest truck stop. And it was going to cost her right around $18. But even if that's not what she did with it, I don't care. It really isn't about what everybody else does. It really is about what do we do. We've been in her position. I had 3 boys and we were living in a smaller mining town. And the house we were living in, we were renting and it sold. Well, the mines were going through a boom and there wasn't enough housing. So all of a sudden, we're with 3 children and nowhere to live. Luckily, we had a conversion van. It had 2 captain's chairs, a big bench that made into a bed, a fridge, a toilet, and a stove. And we lived out of that. We would stay a couple nights in that, and then we'd get a hotel room so we could all shower for a night. I would sit and wait, this tells you how long ago, for the newspaper to come out. I'd be waiting for them to drop it off. And as soon as it came out, I'd be looking for a place. And I'd call, and they would already be gone. And we were sitting there saying, you know what? We're probably some of the richest homeless people there are because we had the money. There just were no housing. We eventually bought a camp trailer and put it on some friends' property. And we lived out of that camp trailer for 3 months and felt very blessed to have that. But if our friends hadn't gave us a place to stay that we could put our trailer on, we could have been living out of our van for a long time. So we've been there. And whether she really was or not, I don't care. I did my part. Life is really about taking the moments to get outside of ourselves and do the things that aren't about us. That's where abundance really comes in, is when we quit worrying about us and worry about others. And I'm not telling you to say, oh, look what a good thing we did. Because, at the end of the day, it was a thing that made me be able to look myself in the mirror. And while it may or may not have helped her, it changed our day. But like my husband said, it very easily could have changed her day as well. I grew up dirt poor. And we were able to have Christmas because people would leave money in our mailbox. We were able to have food because our church gave us food. There was not extra money. Mom would save up so that when the hamburger place had a coupon that you get the hamburgers for 25 cents, we got to go. That was a big deal. And she would save and save for it. We would never have got by without the kindness of others. That's really what life is about. I have to personally grow. That's a big one for me. But my other is I have to give. That is my passion. That is my soul. I've tried to be on the giving end, but we have been on the receiving end more times than I care. And that's hard. I'd much rather give than receive, right? And I've tried to pass that down to my kids. We, like I said, lived in this small mining town. And this shopping center, there would always be somebody out there, same guy, asking for money. And I'd make sure I always had $1, and I'd always give it to one of my kids to give to him. I wanted them to learn this. And it was so cute because it made a bigger impact on my kids than I thought it would. My youngest was in kindergarten, and we pulled into that shopping center one day, and he's like, Mom, he got a job, because his sign would always say, out of work, whatever. And so he was so excited. He'd been watching for the guy, and he wasn't there, so he must have got a job. And that's when I knew that it was making a difference. I was teaching my kids the value of caring about others. No, he hadn't got a job. He was there a few days later, but that wasn't the point. My kids learned. I have been able to give in small ways. I haven't been able to give in big ways yet. That's coming, for sure. But we were the recipients of something really big. Sorry. Two of my mentors, Chris and Sue, gave in the biggest way. When my son Kyle decided he was finally going to start getting out of the house again, we were going to redo. He had a 68 Chevy, and we were going to redo it so that he could use it with his wheelchair. And so Chris had always said, when it comes time for anything for Kyle, you let me know. I want to be part of it. And so we were going to get it painted. And I said, Chris, do you know anybody who does painting and maybe could give us a little bit of a deal? And he sat for a minute and he goes, yeah, I got a friend. And I said, okay, talk to him, see how much he'd paint Kyle's truck for. And he'd come back and he goes, hey, Jeff's going to come look at Kyle's truck and paint it for you. I said, how much? And he goes, nope. And I said, no, that's not how this works. This is my responsibility. He's like, we got this. So after arguing, we paid for paint, and Jeff painted it, and Chris paid for it. And that was hard. That was hard to allow. But then it didn't stop there. Chris calls me and he says, Janae, we would love to fix Kyle's truck all the way up. I said, Chris, my answer would be no, but it's not my truck. Let me talk to Kyle. And I went and told Kyle the offer, and he sat there for a minute and he said, if it means I can get in my truck and not have to worry, yeah, I'll let him. And so I called Chris and I said, would be very grateful. And he said, this isn't a handout, this is a hand up. What an amazing concept, right? He said, Kyle just needs a hand up, that's all. And so the most amazing thing happened. As things were happening to this truck, more people got involved. They took it in to have a stereo done, and they told the story. And the guy put in bed liner. Like everywhere they went, people added extra. People gave discounts. People gave all the way. And when it was all said and done, over 12 people had helped on Kyle's truck. 12 people that I didn't know, who had never met me, who had never met my son, gave willingly, gave wholeheartedly. So, truck finally gets done, and Chris and Sue drive it over. Kyle gets in the truck, and Chris is like, take it for a ride. And he says, well, jump in, Chris, let's go. So the first ride in that truck was Kyle and Chris. And it was such an amazing moment. The blessings we got over that truck were huge. It gave my son freedom for the first time since he'd been paralyzed. It was more than a truck. For all of us, for Chris, for Sue, for me, for Kyle, for my husband, for my boys. This was a symbol of freedom, a symbol of hope, a symbol of a hand up. So I knew we had all these people who had helped, and I didn't know how to thank them, especially because I didn't even know who they were. So I did a picture collage, and it had the truck beforehand, had the truck after, and it had Kyle with his truck and all of us with the truck. And on the back, I wrote a thank you saying, you don't know who we were. We are absolute strangers. And you gave. You gave when you didn't need to. You gave without getting credit. You changed my son's life, knowing that he would never get the opportunity to thank you. You changed our world. And I took him to Chris. And I said, please give these out to everybody. And he came back a week later and he said, that was one of the most special moments I've ever had, giving those out. Now here's how amazing Chris and Sue are. Chris is like, you don't tell anybody we did this, because I'm not going to get business off of this. This is not going to be why people come in and buy from me. That is what giving looks like. That is what changing a life looks like. I will always be grateful for not only what they give my family, but for teaching us what compassion looks like. Because they didn't do it for any other reason than because they wanted to. Not because they were going to get anything from it. And I really can't wait till I have the opportunity to change somebody's life like that. That's the moment that I'm made for. When you get the opportunity to give, it really is about more than giving. It really is about making the world a better place. It's about making you a better person. When you can get outside of what you're going to get and think wholly about that other person, that's what life is about. We are meant to support each other. We are meant to become our best version of ourselves, and that means helping others. I'm telling you, receiving it has been so hard for me, but it has given me a bigger passion to give. It has given me so much in my life. And so while I'm sure Chris would hate that I'm telling this story, at the end of the day, him and Sue are the kind of people I want to be. Their hearts are always in the right place. They are always so selfless. So for a few minutes the other day, I had the opportunity, but I think I need to look for more of them. I think I needed to be reminded that is what life is all about. Thank you for spending this time with me and for listening with an open heart and for choosing to invest in your growth today. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need the reminder that their dreams still matter. Sometimes one conversation, one message, one moment of encouragement can change everything. And if you want to go deeper, my book, Rise, Believe, Become, was written for the in-between seasons, the moments when you know there's more for you, but you're still finding the courage to take the next step. You can find my book on Amazon, and remember, no matter what phase you're in, your dreams don't expire. Until next time, keep rising.